Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to paint these poinsettias, and if you would like to have a real-time version of this tutorial, you can find it up now in Critique Club. Critique Club is $5 a month, and when you join, you have access to 6 years of long-format, more advanced tutorials than I post here on YouTube. So you can check that out. I'll put a link in the video description if you're curious, and otherwise, enjoy the time-lapse here. What I'm doing is wetting some watercolor paper and just putting down a bunch of colors that I plan on using in the painting. I love to get all my colors going right at the beginning of a piece, and then that helps integrate the entire painting. I also added in some Schmincke Aqua bronze, which is it's like a metallic watercolor, and honestly metallic watercolor would work just as well for this, and it would probably stick to your paper a lot better. And then I'm pressing in some plastic wrap. If you've got an old plastic bag, that'll work just as well. And then you got to let it dry, and look at the cool texture you get after you take the plastic wrap off. Now, before I started sketching on here, I wanted to make absolute sure my paper was completely dry, so I hit it with a heat tool. These watercolor pencils are a bit bizarre. They are these woodless colored pencils, but they've got these little caps on them that have brushes, and I'm not so sure that that is a real benefit, and I'm not exactly sure what the deal was with them, because I tried using them and they're really soft, like almost too soft to really push around the pigment. And then I'm like, well, maybe you're supposed to like get water in the chamber so it like liquefies the other end of the pencil. That didn't work. I don't know. I got to play with those a little bit more. So jury's still out on those, which is probably just as well because I can't find them on Amazon anymore. So I don't know. But they are great for sketching. They're pretty much like every other woodless pencil I've used, like Altenew and Create a Color. Very, very similar product. Arteza, very similar product. Kind of like in between a traditional watercolor pencil and a watercolor crayon. They're on the firm side, more like a watercolor pencil. And then you can use the shavings as paint, which I actually do because I needed to sharpen this red pencil. And I just saved the shavings and plopped it out into my palette, and it worked great. So it is kind of nice to have a multi-purpose tool like that. The case is neat. It's novel, but I think the novelty of those brushes on the ends is kind of what interested me. But now, like, you know, they're not only they're really not that useful, why would you need one for every single color? Oh, I was taken in by the novelty. Oh, do you get like that? I love the way this drawing came out. I have to say, I like the shape of the leaves an awful lot. I'm not sure if the finished painting really met my expectations, but I didn't really have a goal I was aiming for with this. I kind of had a rough idea about what I wanted. I just kind of wanted like a big, colorful, bold poinsettia type motif. I guess in that respect, it was effective. I'm putting some of that Schmincke Aqua bronze in gold on my palette just so I can drop it in here and there. It's so metallic and so bright, but I'm wondering if maybe I should have mixed it a little bit more, because if I ran my hand over this when I was done, I was getting the gold dust on my hand. So you may want to just be sure you go over with, you add a little bit of either a fixative to it when you're done, or just make sure you mat it and frame it under glass. I'm kind of wondering though if static, definitely go under glass and not plexiglass, because I'm wondering if the static from plexiglass might actually pull some of those pigment particles up. So that's why I was saying go ahead and use your metallic watercolors if you have them, because I think that would actually be probably a better situation, especially if you're going to frame it in any event, honestly, because if you're not going to frame it, then it could rub off, and if you are going to frame it, then you're not going to see as much of the metallic anyway. So yeah, I think I would just go with the metallic watercolor. But it is fun to play with, and it is super reflective and shiny. But I don't know. I don't think I love that product as much as I used to. Things go like that sometimes. Sometimes you find a product and you're like, wow, this is so great. And then, a couple years later, you use it like, I don't know about this. But anyways, that's the Schmincke Aqua bronze. The watercolors I'm using are by Holbein, and I have a video coming up, I think tomorrow on my YouTube channel, about using the like how much paint is left in a tube once you've completely emptied the tube and you've used the tube wringer and all of that. And I still had quite a bit of paint in those tiny tubes, and so I put them on that serving dish, and I was using that paint up because I figured, why not? I wanted to wash that dish, and it's like, okay, I need to use this paint before I clean the dish up. So I decided to seize the day and use that paint. And I don't use Holbein watercolors too much. I was topping off my Holbein palette because I was trying to, I was kind of inspired to use them more because I went to a Holbein class with my friend Shanna Rowe Jackson from Caution Artists at Play, and it kind of like rekindled my interest in that paint. I reviewed it many years ago when I bought the set of 18. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll top off this palette. Maybe I'll use it more. The thing with the Holbein paint, actually, I think with a lot of tube paint, honestly, I think it's a false comparison when you go tube paint versus half pans, because if you buy a half pan of watercolor, you're generally getting a very concentrated block of color equivalent to a 5 ml tube. And some 5 ml tubes even seem like less dense. And I would top it off my palette several times, let it dry out, top it off again. And I've got big dents from just doing this painting when I had to dip back into the paint. So to me, it just felt like the Holbein paints wore down quicker and also shrunk down more when they were drying. And I do notice that, like, if I'm going to buy half pan watercolors, I prefer to purchase an extruded pan versus a liquid poured pan. Like, for instance, if I buy Schmincke watercolors, I find they wear down so quickly because they are a liquid poured pan, versus if I buy Winsor & Newton pans of watercolors, they wear down much more slowly because they are extruded and they are compressed, and you're getting a lot more. You're getting like 5 mLs in a half pan from Winsor & Newton, whereas Schmincke, I don't think you're getting that much. I think maybe you're getting 2 mLs of paint, even though they dry it and pour it and dry it and pour it. And I find that to be fairly similar across different brands. I think the most concentrated liquid poured pans I've ever purchased were Magello Mission Gold. Remember those big pans I used to have? I find that those don't wear down as quickly as some other brands, but you can let me know what you think in the comments below. That's just my my advice. If you're going to buy half pans, I would definitely look for brands that do extruded half pans. I just feel like you get way more for your money that way. And another thing that's kind of nice, if you buy an extruded pan versus a liquid poured pan, if you're buying a color that is a difficult to re-wet color, and if you buy it in a pan formulation, it is formulated to re-wet better. So I would say, like, if it's a Primatech color, see if Daniel Smith has it in the stick, because that's an extruded dry product, or see if Winsor & Newton has it in a pan. You're going to have a much easier time re-wetting those from a formulation that is from a dried extruded product than it is from a liquid poured pan. So like, whenever I'm going to buy Daniel Smith paint nowadays, I look to see if they have a stick version. A, it's cheaper. And B, if it's one of those Primatech colors, it's going to re-wet so much more easily. And that's definitely the product recommendation I can share. Plus the price, man, especially for Primatech, so much cheaper to get it in a stick. And then I cut it up, throw it in a palette, it's ready to go. It's like a pan. It's just like a ready to go pan without the plastic. And I love that because, it's really hard to get away from plastic and waste in our hobbies. It's really hard anywhere in our life now to get rid of these like single-use things. So if we can, buy a stick of color, chop it off, and put it in a pan we already have, I think that's great. I have to say, though, I didn't really use pans that much until probably the last 15 years or so. I would fill up my studio palette, and if it wasn't for filming YouTube videos where I'm trying to keep things on camera, I really think a big studio palette with big wells is the way to go unless you're traveling, because it's gentler on your brushes. You don't end up with the holes in the middle of the pan from your brush. It wears a lot more evenly. But yeah, they're just so big. You have to have the space for it. So just a little something to think about. I use a credit card scraper in this painting a lot to add the veins in my leaves, and it works so well for this. You can go in if the lines aren't strong enough for you later on. You can go in and use a liner and paint some lines on top of that if you want to accent it a little bit more. Accent it. Why did I say it? That's so weird. I said it so weirdly. And now I've drawn attention to it. Hello. I'm a professional. But it does such a great job. And I find that if you are going to use a credit card scraper, try to use it everywhere. If you're going to do it on one leaf, try to do it on all the leaves. If you're going to do it on one petal, do it to all the petals. Otherwise, it will look a little weird, because when you use the credit card scraper, there's no undo button. You're always going to have that scratch on the paper, and it's always going to be there. You're marring the paper essentially. So to get a continuity with your work, you want to just do it, repeat it enough so it doesn't seem like it's an oddball type of detail. This is, I think, a really cool pattern. I think this painting would be a really neat fabric, because it does have kind of like an interesting full richness to it. But I struggled with the lack of a focal point here. And I don't know, you'll see the end result at the end, and you can let me know if you think it's strong enough. It's almost like an ambient painting. I think I would like frame it, put it up for Christmas time, and that would probably be about it. Here I'm trying to figure out what the heck is the deal with these brushes. What's the deal with the brushes? I felt like Seinfeld there for a minute. Because it's like this, the bristles are so soft that it's not ideal for pushing around the pigment from these pencils. So then like I was putting water in the end because I'm like, oh, I can't dip this too far in the water. I'm going to get water on the woodless thing. But then I was like, oh, maybe you're supposed to. Maybe you're supposed to get water in there so it like activates the other end of the pencil and makes it into like a watercolor brush pen. But that didn't work. So I don't know. These are confusing. I need to investigate more. I did the review preview video on my channel yesterday, and I got so many suggestions for what I should review first. There were quite a few that were really popular. Some people suggested things that weren't in the review preview, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, there was a few votes for the woodless watercolor pencils. They're interesting. They're interesting. I wonder what happened to them. I can't find them on Amazon anymore, so they may be one of those weird unicorns that you never see again. That happens sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe more people got wise to what the heck are these brushes for? I don't know. Oh, who can say? Who can say? So here I'm going in with a liner, just trying to accent those veins that didn't quite turn out as dark as I had hoped when I did them with a credit card scraper. I do like the little bursts of gold. I think it's kind of pretty. I think this would be kind of a pretty fabric, to be honest. I like that texture in the background. I think it adds, from the plastic wrap, I think it adds a nice amount of depth. You know, it doesn't seem too sparse. You could definitely do this. I think if you did the poinsettias, like I drew them and painted them on white paper, it might feel a little stark though. I think you would need something. You'd need something in the background. I thought about adding some collage on this, but I didn't really know what I would put in there. Oh, and here I decided that why not, towards the end stage of this painting, take out a tool I've never used before and see how it works on the painting. And so I got this ruling pen out. I bought this last year at a little art shop in Portland. And I've never used it before. It's been sitting like next to my table on a shelf, like waiting for inspiration. And I decided I'm taking it out now. Never used it before. So there's a few wayward blobs, but I think it's all right. I don't even know if it's a good one. I don't even know if I picked out a good ruling pen. It was like $4, so probably not. But it was Westcott, I think. It was like an actual brand that I'd heard of before. I was definitely looking for something new and fun to play with at the art store. But so we got some interesting line variety there. And I wanted some highlights on the center. So I took this woodless white pencil, watercolor pencil, and I decided to just kind of dip it in water and just go and add some highlights. And I wasn't so sure about that. The thing with the white like paint or pencil in a water-based media is that it tends to look really cold because the binders are pretty cold. You know, you don't have that oil like a linseed oil that warms it up if you have titanium white in an oil paint. It's just titanium white seems very cold looking. So that looked a little too harsh. So I went in with this like seafoam green color, which is really pretty. Dipped that in the water and started adding to it. And then I just kind of dabbed in some red for the centers of those little flowers in the middle, and I'm still not so sure. Actually, looking back at it, I like it better than I was when I was painting it. Sometimes it can go either way. Sometimes you love a painting when you're working on it, and then you go back and look and you're like, oh, what was going on there? Kind of like you think you have a really great outfit on, and somebody takes your picture, and you feel so good, and then you see the picture and you're like, oh, that was not a good choice. You know, it's kind of like that. Am I alone on that? I don't know. But I'm actually liking this more looking back at it than I was when I was kind of in the midst of painting it. Sometimes, you know, you'll go through these little phrases. I really like that right now, that poinsettia that's up in the upper left-hand corner. I love that poinsettia. And it could just be the way the light is reflecting off the gold. I'm not sure, but I love the shape of that. So this is a really fun, actually, I have to say, this was really fun to draw. It was a fun experience in like expressive drawing, making these poinsettias. I paint poinsettias every year, and we've got another one next week. I got a real-time line and wash poinsettia project coming for you, so stay tuned for that. That'll be a nice relaxing one. It's a half an hour real time. Now I grabbed some of the Real Brush pens by Jade Davenport. Maybe I already did that. I kind of looked off screen, so I'm not sure. I used a little bit of their mermaid markers from Jane Davenport on there too, just to get a little pop of color. At this point, I'm not worried about light fastness, although this is my Light Fast Gouache palette. It's one I made from a variety of different brands. I added a few drops of blending medium in each color, so it would re-wet easily, and it's working out so well. This is a ceramic palette from Meeden, and I highly recommend it. It's a great palette. It would be great for watercolor. My only regret is that when I put the colors in, I put my primaries in the wells that had the pointy triangle, and I should have put them in the wells that were actually shaped in the more of a triangle shape. But it doesn't matter. But it's just kind of one of those things that, you know, you realize as soon as you get the palette fill, it's like, oh, that's what that meant. I thought that maybe the pointier points would be the primer. Well, it is on my palette, so anyway. But I have a variety of brands. I chose brands for the color, the pigment, and how light fast it was. So I have a variety between Daniel Smith, Holbein, Winsor Newton, Royal Talons. It's mostly Da Vinci, I would say, because they pan really well and they're very light fast, but they're not as opaque as the other ones. So, you know, you give a little, you get a little. You have to kind of pick and choose what your most important qualities for a palette are. And for this one, it was light fastness. I flicked on some gold, some white. I'm going to flick on some gold. Oh, I regret putting the gold in that palette though, because that was so hard to clean out of there. It was like it wanted to go to dust and just static cling to everything on there. So I would put that, like maybe get a little butter tub lid or something that is isolated from the rest of your paints and put that stuff in there, because it just gets everywhere. Isolate that. Get a little yogurt cup or something, and that's going to be your gold mixing well for now until eternity, because that stuff is like glitter, how it gets on everything. It's crazy. I don't think the color pencils were all that effective. I did go in and try to add a little definition here and there with some, but I don't know. I don't know if it was necessary. I don't think it really added much, but there you have it. There you have it. I keep fountain pens, I keep brush pens, I keep color pencils, fine liners, white gel pens, all of that stuff. I keep it handy right on my desk because they can make the difference between something having enough contrast or what do I want to say? Contrast or sharpness at the end, or just for little adjustments and whatnot. It's nice to have it. A lot of times you're not even going to notice that you used it, but it does make a little bit of difference in the sharpness. And in a minute here, you're going to see the finished artwork. I think it turned out pretty cute, honestly. It's going to be a nice decoration. If you want to do it real time with me, check out the tutorial in Critique Club. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy holiday. And until next time, happy crafting.